The most requested video on this channel is how to make an animation. So today, we'll make an animation. This video is all about the process or pipeline that I use to create these moving pictures. They're average quality by today's cinematic standards, but they got the job done. These shots here represent years of work. Today's animation will be considerably less involved. I learned about lighting, texturing, and rendering while in school for game design. I built on that foundation, making short animated films mostly about space. When starting this YouTube channel, I thought animation would be a great way to show aspects of projects that you don't normally see in a DIY setting. After a fair amount of experimentation, I put together a workflow that could produce studio renders in relatively short order. Here I'll break down the critical aspects of my pipeline without getting into too much detail. This video is more about tips, tricks, and what is really required to create an animation. If you have any questions about what follows, do let me know in the comments. I try to respond to everyone. For rendering, I use Redshift 3D. This software is available for Blender. Blender is a very popular piece of free 3D software. I will not be using it today, but all of the techniques covered in this video are directly applicable to Blender and any other 3D program. The full suite of programs that I use is 3ds Max, Photoshop for textures, with After Effects and Premiere for video editing. Making the animation for my vacuum former build took about 8 hours, not including render time. The whole process starts by importing the CAD model. Render settings could get a whole video to itself, but we don't have time for that. In short, I have a PC that's purpose-built for GPU rendering, and Redshift is one of the fastest rendering engines on the market. I turn on global illumination. This is where the realistic lighting comes from. Motion blur increases realism by mimicking how a video camera operates. If there is no blur, the renders can look fake, and nobody likes fake renders. Let's see the studio. This one is a hockey puck, or some sort of Hostess snack cake. Any cylinder, box, or even a single wall and floor with smooth corners will work nicely. Making the studio large like this will allow for color variation in the background. The lights will be brighter in the center of the scene, and the corners will remain dark for greater contrast. Here I have a few area lights, one key light, one rim light, and one bounce light do most of the work. You can make these easily by drawing them into the scene, translating, and rotating them into place. In a studio render, just like in a video studio, large soft lights tend to give the best results. I do an initial lighting pass prior to adding textures to the scene. This allows me to make materials that are more realistic because they are adjusted based on predetermined lighting conditions. Now, just like in the real world, if you want premium video, having a nice camera rig will help significantly. After years of animating, this is what I came up with. It's a camera with a target parented to a circle. It's simple to set up and easy to use. The camera view is controlled entirely by adjusting various aspects of the circle. When rotating it, the camera orbits perfectly around the object while maintaining a consistent distance. What I love most about this rig is that the camera motion can be keyframed all from this point of view, and the gizmo is almost always in the center of the screen. Zoom is controlled simply by scaling the circle. I can translate the camera target for more dramatic movement, as well as controlling the focal point for depth of field changes. This effect can create shots that feel similar to a camera crane on a track or a robotic arm. In general, I like to increase realism in these animations by treating the 3D camera as if it were an actual video camera. This is another way to drive realism in the scene. Once the scene is set up, I start texturing. For my videos, I often sample directly from stock photos or footage. This helps to better match the 3D world with the real one. Once all the textures are created, I start making materials. After doing quite a few of these renders, I have a bank of materials to work from. This speeds up the process, but there is always a few one-offs in each scene. Once the materials are applied, I need to unwrap the UVs on some specific objects. Each face on a 3D object has a set of 2D coordinates that reference the assigned texture. By unwrapping these faces in a specific way, I can control how the texture appears on the object. As I work through the materials, I make slight changes to both lighting and render settings. Once I'm happy with the look, it's time to animate. The first step is to jump into Premiere to figure out the length of the animation. I already have this video largely cut together with a sample script in place. I need to know where the video will transition in and how long it will last. With my animations, I am creating what is generally called an exploded view. The imported object is always in its completed state to begin with. So, what I like to do is work backwards. It can be challenging to think in the reverse direction, but I found that I am far less likely to encounter issues with organization, parenting, and timing when I am dissecting objects rather than assembling them. Based on moments in the script, I make one thing happen, then the next, and so on. It's relatively easy to set a key for the start and end position of an object. But if the movement is too fast or too slow, the result will look silly and distracting. Also, if an object moves too quickly and motion blur is active, the result can be a total loss of detail in the rendered image. If an object needs to move fast to sync with the script, I can move it in quickly, but then slow the motion dramatically before it comes to a stop. This is done by adjusting the type of keyframe or these Bezier curves. Not only objects can be animated, but their components as well. For this particular animation, I keyframed the vertices on the heat element itself. Animation software is very powerful and just about everything can be keyframed. After the exploded view is done, I can keyframe the camera rig. This too will be timed up with key moments in the script. Once this step is done, I will output a preview animation to make sure that everything lines up with the script. If it does, then it's time to render the sequence. There are many options for render passes that are useful in compositing, but in the interest of file size and complexity, I tend to keep things simple. A material ID will allow me to select specific objects in the scene, and a reflections or specularity pass will allow me to boost the highlights on an object after the render is complete. The renders I do for this channel typically take 1 to 2 days to process. Once they're done, I composite the render passes in After Effects. Here I will color grade the foreground and background and make any further corrections and effects required for the shot. Then the sequence is rendered and dropped into the Premiere timeline. That's how one of these animations is made, and this is the result. If you really like this video and you want to know more, let me know in the comments. I have been doing this sort of work for about 15 years, and I can get into detail on all these various subjects. Thanks again to my patrons on Patreon. Your support created the power needed to render these 2,500 frames that you see here. Many thanks to all of you that watch my videos to the end. Please smash that like button and of course subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel. If I ever make any follow-up videos to this one, the links will appear right here at the end.